At each new scene and each new chapter, there is one question I have continued to ask myself in revision. Should I rework or should I rewrite? Maybe you find yourself asking the same question, and maybe you're not always sure which one is the right answer. There are so many things that go into making a scene feel complete and like it's the right fit in your book. There's action, dialogue, description, syntax, and everything in between. How do you know when you just need to improve upon what's already there and when you need to scrap what you have and restructure it completely? There are 3 questions I ask myself to know which route to take when I am beginning to revise a new scene or new chapter. And today I want to share them with you to hopefully help you know when it's best to rewrite and when it's best to just rework. But first, something's missing. Hold on a moment. That's better. Delicious. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. I look at 3 main things when I'm evaluating if a scene or a chapter needs rewritten or just reworked. The first is plot advancement, the second is character development, and the third is setting enhancement. To kind of elaborate on each of these things, plot development, obviously, as you go through a book, you're going to have different plot points and things that progress the story for the reader and the audience, and also push along the other elements of your story, like character development. Character development is the changes that your character goes through and experiences throughout their duration in the world or the setting that you've created and in their interactions with other characters. As each beat of the plot unfolds, your character should not be staying stagnant, but instead having things that affect them in their view of the world or who they are as a person. And setting enhancement or world building is the ability to place your reader deeper into the world that you've created. So these are the 3 things that I'm always looking for when I'm looking at a new scene or a new chapter that needs revision that I don't quite know which I should do with. So I have to ask myself these 3 questions. Number 1, does this current scene and or chapter enhance the plot of the book? Is it pushing it forward? Are there things that are unfolding, whether it be through action or dialogue, that are critical for the plot to move forward throughout the book? Obviously, not every single scene that you write can, nor should it, be some huge plot event. If every single chapter or every single scene is a major plot point, then your book is going to be pretty exhausting to read because the reader will constantly be getting whiplash. That being said, you shouldn't have chapters or scenes, at least not too many of them, that feel really stagnant or pointless to the book. Sometimes scenes that are a little bit more dull in nature can be helpful if they give your reader more context as to who the character is or what is going on in the world that they're living in. But that would give you 2 green check marks with the following questions. A scene like that would help you build character development or enhance the setting of the book. Most of the time, you're looking for 2 green check marks when you go to rework a scene. I look for 1 green check mark and 2 X's if I'm going to rewrite it. Or sometimes you get all 3 green checks or 3 no's. So that would look like, for example, I have a chapter in my book that I recently had to rewrite instead of rework because it worked for my setting enhancement, but it was not helpful for character development nor plot advancement. That's because, basically, the main character of my book enters this new world, meets new characters, and is supposed to have a very bad taste in her mouth about all of it. In the first draft of my book, she entered this space and was basically granted asylum, and while she had tense relationships with some of the other characters, there was not enough enemy going on. So I knew that I had a general setting that was okay, but the character development that was taking place and the overall plot point and the way it was moving wasn't quite in the direction that I needed. So on that particular chapter, I kept a lot of the setting description that was there and enhanced it a little bit more, but I had to rewrite a lot of the dialogue in order to have the character development be correct for where I want the plot to go and where I want the characters to be. And I had to have some different actions take place in the scene to have the plot advance the way that I want it to for the book to make sense later down the road for the reader. So the second question you need to ask yourself is, does this current scene and or chapter have character development that works in the direction I need my book to work in? Obviously, as I just said a couple minutes ago, a book where your character stays stagnant, never changes their mind, never sees any new views in the world, and is unimpacted by the people or things around them would be a pretty boring book to read. You want your characters to change, whether it be subtle and underlying throughout the book or big obvious changes through life events that happen or something really traumatic or whatever it might be that you come up with. You don't want your characters to be the same the whole way through. You want to give your audience something to grab onto, whether it be some type of trait that everybody can relate to, like selfishness or a desire to do good in the world. I know those two things were kind of contradicting, but they're common traits that people tend to wrestle with. You need to have something that your character is wrestling with in order to relate to the audience and to give your reader investment to push the story forward and give them reason to keep reading. Sometimes I feel like there's two different plots happening in every story I write. The first is the overall plot development of the book. What's the big problem taking place? Maybe it's a war, maybe it's a legal battle, and then there's the subplot taking place that is expressed through character development. It's a whole second set of things that your character is walking through because of what's happening in their external environment. You don't just need external change in your story through plot development. You need internal change through your character development. So ask yourself that question when you look at a scene. Is this scene currently serving my plot development and my character development? Is it serving one and not the other? And what kind of changes do I need to make it 2 green check marks instead of 2 red X's? And then the third question you really need to ask yourself is, does this chapter or scene enhance the setting or build the world further for the audience? I think a lot of the times it's easy to forget to make your characters interact with the world around them when you're writing a scene. We can get so caught up in dialogue or action that we forget to make the world we're in 3-dimensional. For example, if you wrote a book where a character lives on a horse ranch and the audience knows that as a fact, this character lives on a horse ranch, but we never see that character feed the horses or ride the horses or muck out a stall or have to clean their tack or anything like that, you might know as a fact that they live on a ranch, but you might not feel any form of connection to that setting, nor will it really feel 3-dimensional and real in your mind. The best books and the best stories create places that we wish we could go for ourselves. If you have a setting that is just described one time and the character never actively interacts with this thing that should impact who they are as a person, your world is going to fall flat for the audience. I think a big part of this comes through first-hand narrative. If you are writing in the first-person narrative, it can be really easy to make your world feel a little bit more in depth. A lot of the times you're telling a story through the character's eyes. So you're describing what they're seeing, how they're seeing it, what they're doing to interact with those items. So sometimes that can be a little bit easier if you're writing in that narrative. In third-person narrative, you might find yourself saying something like, "She crossed the room to give him a hug." In first-person narrative, you might find yourself saying, "The old floorboards creak under my foot as I move across the room, wrapping my arms around him and embracing him in a hug." Something like that. One of those images was a lot more vivid than the other. I will say, though, there's a lot of third-person writing that is super descriptive and absolutely excellent. So I'm not at all saying that that's not the case. However, I do think it's a little bit easier to not miss making your setting have more depth when it's in first person. Hopefully that all made sense. So that's the third thing you should ask yourself. Does this scene serve my setting or world building? Is it drawing my reader more into the world that I've put together? Or is it pushing my audience away from it? So a great example of this is that scene I just referenced a couple minutes ago. When my main character stepped into this new world, there was lots of description about how it looked different than the place she came from, the feelings she had, the things she was interacting with there. But her actions and her words to other characters in the setting did not advance the plot, and it also gave the audience an incorrect understanding of the character development that was happening between two of my main characters. So when I went in to revise this scene, I knew it would not just need a little bit of touch-up. I knew it was going to need some pretty heavy-handed touch-up, if not completely rewritten. There was some lines I was able to save and keep, whether that be a little piece of dialogue that still worked or a setting description I really liked, but a lot of that chapter was deleted paragraphs that I just rewrote the second time. Some writers find it really helpful to rewrite no matter what. They might have 3 green check marks for a scene, even in the first draft, and in the second draft, they still find it's a stronger description of what they're going for if they just rewrite the whole thing. That's kind of a trial and error process, process. You can figure that out for yourself through revision, and every writer is a little bit different in what they like and how they like to style that process. I have found that asking myself these 3 questions has given me a lot of clarity and helped me move a little bit quicker through revision. The other thing to keep in mind within this is that you don't have to get all of these things perfect in the second draft, which is where I'm currently at. Sometimes I know all 3 of these questions are headed in the right direction in a given scene after I've touched it up, but I know it's not quite perfect where I'd want to place it in the hands of a reader. That's where you can go back in and enhance these things in your 3rd or 4th draft. You can always make your setting more rich. You can always add more intel for the audience to feel connected to your characters, and you can always make your plot beats a little bit more concise and clear. So these are the 3 things that have helped me immensely as I've gone through this revision process, and I would encourage you to ask them to yourself next time you look at a new scene that needs revised and you're wondering if it needs completely rewritten or just a little reworked. Remember that the 3 main elements a well-written scene should have are plot advancement, character development, and setting establishment or world building. If you have these 3 things and they're to your satisfaction, then you're probably done and ready to move forward to line level edits. If you don't, or you're missing 1 or 2 of them, you can go back in, add words, take words away, rewrite words. Everything is the step in the right direction, and I encourage you to be unafraid as you step into revision and you get your hands dirty in your work. You got this. As long as you don't quit, it'll lead to success. If you're new here, my name's Andy. I am an aspiring author working on revising her debut novel, which is the first installment in my fantasy trilogy called House of Aphdos. If you'd like to see me continue to revise that and be around when I self-publish, then you'll want to follow this channel. If you're not new, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this content. Feel free to introduce yourself if you're new viewer in the comments. I'd love to say hey and get to know you a little bit better, and I hope you'll stick around. Oh, also, if you want to fuel revision by buying me a virtual coffee, my link for my Ko-fi is down below, and I would really appreciate that support. I'll see you next week for another video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye.